Morning, Clare, morning, Liz. We're just waiting for a few of us to join, but thought we'd let you in the room so you weren't left in the dark. Hope you're both well.
Yeah,
Lovely
morning. Thank you.
Hi.
Hey, Claire.
Thank you
Hey,
for
Liz.
joining. So the idea with this is to try and keep it conversational. We don't want any death by PowerPoint. Give you a little background. We've got 4 specific questions, all evidence-backed, with anecdotes related to it, and then ties into the actual core topic. So light touch, really would appreciate your engagement. Any questions? There's no bad questions. I frame myself as the useful idiot in the room anyway, so happy to hear any questions and address them. And again, it's more of a collaborative thing. What we're discussing here is a hot topic is just getting hotter over time as more and more situations unfold that mean this is an issue that needs to be addressed. So that's kind of the premise of it. So if you're both happy with that, that's great.
Yep.
Consider it a podcast recorded with a live studio audience.
Yeah, we're expecting a few more, but you're always nervous at the start of a webinar that nobody shows up, even though you've got all these registrations and everybody wants to jump in and everybody seems keen. So yeah, you have these intrusive thoughts and an underlying anxiety that, oh, well, what if nobody does show up? And everybody says, oh, I definitely want the recording if I don't. But yeah, I don't know if you've run any yourself in anything like this within the firm, so you probably get the gist.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you was at the Big Hand event, wasn't you, Claire, doing the talk on the document piece?
Yes.
Yeah, it was quite
Yeah, I'm here really for just like to see what you guys are doing, really, to see where I could fit in. It's the first one that I've been to. AI ready and governance, it's kind of at Norton Rose Fulbright. It's not something that I'm really that close to. There's a lot more important people than me at the firm that deal with governance, and I tend to just take their lead. But absolutely, you can never have enough information. So
yeah, and I suppose that the main piece of this is it does affect everybody in the firm. So it's not owned by one particular area. It's actually everybody working together, and there's a cultural challenge as well when you're dealing with the earners and the way they want to operate. So all of these things again affects everybody. So it's still hopefully useful for you, Claire, especially with the document piece. And I know you touched on your talk about how people work, and they work in different ways just on the document side, which is obviously where you operate. So again, as AI comes more into the workflow, that's absolutely going to be the case.
Yeah, definitely.
And obviously, as you've got a background, your role is specifically in governance. So I suppose you're looking at this through a slightly different lens, but something that's coming in onto your radar, I'd imagine quite aggressively now with all the high profile cases.
CLS see sort of one of the big growth unlocks being around AI and how we can use that, not only in terms of how we provide services to clients, but also the kind of operational back end, for want of a better term. So I'm learning and interested and genuinely want to understand kind of thoughts around governance. A bit like you were saying, Claire, there's people way above my pay grade who are sat there, certainly in the technology space, worrying about governing AI because it's one of those. It's a thing for good, but you've got to manage it and use it in the right way so that it kind of is that yin to the human yang, because I think that coming together is the magic piece. So understanding from you guys this morning around kind of governance thinking and observations will be really helpful, because we don't know what we don't know, do we? So looking forward to hearing more.
We'll do our best to cover as much as possible. But like I say, it's part of the reason why we created Govscape in the first place. Is that there's almost like that gap of knowledge, if you want, or experience around AI, mapping all of the foundational activities that make AI successful into an unknown kind of entity, really, as far as AI goes. So it was the bedrock as to why we created it. So today we're not selling Govscape or any, it may be mentioned as part of the conversation, but it's more trying to be a bit more thought-provoking, more than anything. Let's say there's a lot more depth to where we can go with all of this, but we've got a small window of time to cover as much as we can. So we'll obviously there'll be more of these types of events. We're just talking about, this is our first one, so we're ripping a plaster off today. So probably best just getting started, Luke, because like I said, I don't think anyone else is going to be joining. We just send the recording out to people who aren't on the session.
Yeah, perfect. I don't know if you can see my screen at all.
Yes, all good.
Perfect. So just again, underpinning, I think the key piece here, you've got 1,600 plus documented court cases worldwide now that involve AI fabrications reaching a courtroom, and around 9% of them have been in the last sort of 15, 16, 18 months. So I think it really is such a big issue that we do need to look at. So the first question on the agenda is, do you actually know where AI is already being used inside the firm? Just a statistic to underpin that, 75% of the largest UK firms are already using AI, 60% plus exploring generative AI, and that's an SRA-backed thing. And there's an anecdotal there from Hill Dickinson as well, just talking about that. And again, a policy doesn't equal a map of where AI actually touches your matters. So I think that's the key difference here. When I was at the Big Hand event, a lot of people talked about having an AI policy, but a policy is completely separate to owning the operational governance as AI now goes into the workflow. So I suppose it's good to sort of put that out to yourself, James.
Yeah, you put a spotlight straight on me. Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, we've gone round this topic between the three of us a few times, and we're seeing like probably the biggest misconception that organisations think that AI implementations is just purely a tech problem, but it's more than that. It's a lot deeper. It's if you want to dilute it down into something, a term, it's more of a visibility problem. Because probably similar to everybody who's on the call, we see every firm, they'll know about Copilot, ChatGPT, other approved AI tools that are out there. But the bits that they don't know about is like things like shadow AI, so the use of AI without any kind of formal approval, those little pockets of people, doing stuff in the little, corners of the universe and gaining efficiencies, and that's great. Any personal subscriptions that might be having, prompt sharing between, colleagues, etc. Any kind of team specific experimentation. And then, the workflow automation that's done in those specific teams that's built locally. And those are the areas where it's making people very, very nervous. And I think I've spoke about this a couple of times with a few people where, with organizations that we've come into, and we're talking about AI readiness over the past probably 12, 18 months. Some of them have had like an AI strategy of AI everywhere. And it's a very kind of dangerous concept for people to hear, because they just think they can just go off on tangents. And I think this is where people are getting, a lot of nervousness around that. Again, going back to what Luke says, it's a lot of organizations have an AI policy because they feel like they have to. But there's no real kind of deeper levels to that. So, there's very few that have like an AI inventory, so they don't know what AI solutions that are in place, and what the risks are being introduced from those AI solutions. Again, even deeper to that, even less know about which other assets are exposed to risk as a result, from a workflow point of view, an application point of view, a data point of view, data sharing, data dependency. There's a whole raft of things that people aren't really getting to the depths of, and that's what we're seeing. It's not an opinion. It's one of the reasons why we've kind of moved into this space more is because we were being asked the question from a data perspective, I should say. I say, Steve, I don't know whether you got any thoughts on any of that.
Yeah, I think from my point of view and from my own experience, touching on what you said there, James, is that a lot of firms rush into AI or AI projects and automation projects without actually thinking about where the controls are, where it touches, the data integrity. From my experience, a lot of that creates what I call like a bit of a chaos scenario, where you've got unvalidated data causing downstream problems. You know, you've got, from my experience again, you've got technical teams, separate technical teams, sometimes working in silos, and you've not got the key stakeholders and all the relevant people there at the early stages. So you've not got that accountability and the ownership there, and that's where having the governance piece in place, where you've got the controls, you've got the accountability, you've got the fact that you can how you do it type thing, like, you know, rather than just rushing in and, oh, if we automate this process, we could save the 3 or 4 admin people, you know, and to some firms that could be like 75k a year or something like that. That's what some people are seeing, and they're like, let's get it in type thing, but they're not considering the actual risks and that are involved in that, or the accountability and the evidence that they will have to provide if they get asked questions by a client or whatever type thing, like, you know, or the regulatory bodies. So
exactly that. You know, there's pockets of assets, processes, data that's always going to be unknown. And, you know, if we ask that question to, you know, 90% of the companies we speak to, it'll show me everywhere where AI exists. I'm 100% certain that they won't be able to tell you.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's a very dangerous scenario. Again, you know, going back to the technical aspect of it, you know, you're introducing a transformational kind of solution into an existing workflow without a huge amount of thought. And again, that's kind of like the conversations that we've been having, where people are very nervous around, you know, what AI means to them. You know, they can recognize that, you know, they can see the benefits of it, but what does that actually mean? You know, how did they get it right? How did they make sure that the foundations are right? And I think it's a real, it's a bugbear. It's not a bugbear. It's a wrong term. It's a problem for execs, for committees, for boards, you know, to take this on board and allow it to just kind of flow through, because it's, you know, ultimately, you know, you get it wrong, you're looking at, you know, reputational damage in effect, potentially, if it goes south. You know, and again, you know, it goes back to the point I made before. You know, it's you know, the first challenge isn't control, it's visibility. You know, you can't ultimately govern what you can't see, and I think that's part of one of the, you know, the issues which makes people nervous, because it isn't seen. You know, it's okay, you know, historically, you know, you might have a little applet that you might install locally, and it might make you do your job a little bit better, or it might have a little bit of a sense check about what you're doing. But with AI, you're actually working solutions into workflows, which has a knock-on effect to the dependencies of other departments, as an example.
Claire, do you have any interactions in the firm? Is there any discussions around this piece? I know you're very much in a specific area, but a lot of these things, again, do go across the board. I was just intrigued.
Oh, yeah, always. And the thing that worries me the most is that when you say about, I don't think people realise how much AI is out there and how much they're using, because they say, oh yeah, I don't use AI because I don't use Copilot. It's like, no, I know, but do you use this? And do you use, you know, we've massively invested in a lot of drafting, proofing, the kind of legal tools that are assisting and streamlining. And I had a conversation with one of the knowledge lawyers when we were asked about the new trainees, and we were like, right, we want to give them this, and this. And I said, well, hold on. I think they should learn how to do it without AI first. I think you still got to have a basic there. You've still got to have a foundation. You can't, otherwise we'd all be lawyers. I mean, let's face it, we could all just put type something in and get a contract drafted. But how do you know the output is correct? It's accurate. It's not hallucinating. I mean, I know it's moved so fast, even from, a couple of years ago when we first got it and you put, into Copilot, who is Clare Winzar. And apparently I was a partner based up in Leeds. Obviously it was hallucinating. Lord only knows where it got it from. But ultimately it's got better. Of course it's got better. More people are using it. It's learning, do I dare say. But it's doing it, and it is making things easier. But I do worry about the people that don't realise they're using it. They just think it maybe is software, or maybe it's an application rather than AI, because they don't use Copilot, they don't use AI.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I mean, how do you know it's wrong if you don't know what's right? You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that the knowledge lawyer themselves actually said to me, well, I never washed my clothes in a river, but I know how to work a washing machine. And I was like, okay, good analogy. But ultimately, I'm not talking about washing machines. We're talking about lawyers, and we're talking about reputation. And do you know what I mean? It's like, it's a little bit more important.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's if you run your reds into your whites, you're not going to lose your job, are you?
No, exactly. There's nothing wrong with pink.
No, there's, it takes a certain level of masculinity to pull pink off, So
absolutely. Yeah, totally.
What's it like in your world, Liz? Is that a similar kind of landscape of certain challenges that you're having to address, and conversations that are being had?
It is definitely, there's a definite flavour of kids in sweet shops when it comes to AI, understandably. And I think at one end of the spectrum, people are like, it's okay, I just banged it into Copilot, out it comes, that's taken me 5 minutes rather than 5 hours. But there are other parts of our business that are a lot more mature in how they're using AI, and understandably in terms of how that shows up in how we manage cases, etc. But I was just reflecting on when we were talking about governance. It's governance by its nature generally, and its perception is seen as kind of clunky, slow, behind the curve. And I haven't got the answer clearly, so I'd be very rich. But I'm intrigued to see how you govern something that is so fast moving, so progressive, if you like. And maybe it's, I don't know, I'm sat here thinking it's boiling it back down to kind of what holds true for governing anything, really. And a bit like you guys were saying at the top of it about, do you know where this thing's taking place? Do you know who's accountable for it? Do you know what or how you are making sure that the outputs are being checked by qualified people? And then wonder whether it's stuff. It's almost a bit like, when GDPR came out and we were doing sort of inventory work and sort of systems and processes of inventories. God, I'm really going back into the archives now. But is it that kind of premise where it's not about, it's almost just making sure you know where it is and where it's up to. Maybe a bit like looking after a teenager, you know where they are, you know what they're up to, but like when they're where they are, they're kind of, there's a little bit of freedom around what they're doing. I don't know. I'm sort of thinking out loud. What are your thoughts from a governance?
Yeah, again, all of the above, really. I mean, the governance in its purest sense is still as valuable in terms of AI as it was or is with non-AI kind of practices and things like that. The thing is, you got to take it from a slightly different level and go deeper. So you have your frameworks, the ISO frameworks, you have your policy that maps against that. It's providing removing the friction between identifying those gaps, turning those gaps into, actionable actions, if you want, and keeping that kind of constant focus and checking against the policies, the gaps, the issues, the risks, the controls that go around that you implement within and through the system, and putting it in a perspective where it's not just a file structure or a folder structure that gets checked, a couple of weeks before an audit to make sure everything's in line, and then you go through your audit and then they tell you what's wrong. It's got to be constant. It's got to be proactive. It's got to be continually evolving, because that's what AI is doing, and that's where, again, and it's not a shameless plug, but that's what we're trying to achieve with Govscape. It provides that kind of end-to-end traceability with all of those kind of assets, the controls, the outputs, and putting it into a solution which is constantly reminding and prompting and saying, check this, check that, this is out of date, this needs to be updated, and so you're constantly forcing that kind of proactivity within the process, and that's kind of where we're going at with Govscape in today's kind of world. But then you can say, once you've got those kind of practices in place and it's working and it's humming, and that's great, but there's, again, with the way that AI is working, and the points I made before about what you don't know what you don't know, having that kind of extra layer, almost like an intrusive governance capability, where it will check outbound audit logs and capture anybody that's going to a personal chat GPT and putting a matter up there and asking for some sort of output or a response, or answer a question or whatever, and it catches that in real time, and again that then gets flagged, and it's those are the kind of things that we need to start thinking of from an AI perspective, because it's so fluid. Again, that's just kind of where we see the market going in this perspective. As opposed to being reactive, you've got to be more proactive where AI is concerned.
Nice, thanks for the input on that both. That's really useful as well, hearing how it affects individuals in different roles. Again, it affects everybody involved. Just switching gears a little bit now, so next question on this was, who is accountable for approving, supervising and reviewing that use case? So I think we've actually touched on that a little bit already, so it's a nice little segue into it, but it is a question that does need answering. So I'm not sure who to throw this out to first, whether to throw it out to you, Stephen. Obviously, Stephen Lilly's had a background in a high volume conveyancing firm for over 23 years. Governance and cyber is his expertise, so he does know his stuff when it comes to that piece. So I think it'd be good just to get a little bit of insight from yourself on that. No pressure.
Yeah, and I think from my point of view, I go back to what I said earlier, it's just not having the right people involved at the outset, and everyone thinks it's just a technical solution that we're putting in place, so IT own it and it's up to them to make sure all the controls are in place. But actually, who are the people that are using it? Who's accountable for that? And who's signed it off? Who's validated that bit of work type thing that AI is doing type thing? And I think, from my experience, that there's not enough of the leadership involved, as well as again, from my experience, it's the tech team's problem. It's AI, it's tech type thing, and actually the people that use it, your head of risk, everybody needs to be involved at the outset, and who's actually checking the data and signing off what AI is actually not only touching but changing and outputting and putting into the actual workflow as well type thing, so.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as I say, it's the old adage, isn't it? Everyone assumes someone owns AI and it's all in hand, but nobody exactly knows who. And again, this is part of the problem that we're seeing.
Yeah.
And that's it. And when it goes wrong, everyone points the finger at IT. But if everybody else was involved, then that problem might not have occurred, because IT don't know everything,
I think there's probably. Oh, sorry, Claire. Go on.
Go on,
You go
on.
after.
I was going to say, I think Norton Rose are kind of working really well with this at the minute. I think this is the best the communication's ever been between the business, the knowledge teams, the lawyers, and IT. I mean, it used to be, you know, IT were down in the basement being, you know, left with their servers and plugging things in and switching things off and on. But now I think everybody across the teams now, we've all got contacts. They, you know, they've got their contacts. We've even got a legal transform team. So it's not just the lawyers, the paralegals, the trainees. We've then got like another set. In addition to knowledge lawyers, we've got legal transform teams and then obviously risk and compliance. And everyone is across this so well at the minute, and everyone is talking to each other. And I think the last 3 to 4 years, I think it's been the best it's ever been for IT. It's like they've brought us out of the basement and put a light on us and said they can do more than restart.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and again, I think that's great, you know, because communication's a big part of all of this.
Yeah.
You know, and having access to, you know, a viewpoint as to where you are, combine that with, you know, your panels, you know, your committees and whatever else that you know you need to create. And in large enterprise, there's quite often a lot of that, and that's great. Smaller companies not so much, but you know the enterprise seem to get that bit quite right. And it's again, you know, having that kind of link into what's actually in play and where it's at and what the problems are, what the, you know, the forefront of the risks are. Being able to present that information quite quickly is also key. And again, me and Steve had a conversation. Like, Steve, you back me up on this one, or tell me I'm wrong. But you know, historically, you've had to prepare, you know, spreadsheets and reports and things like that manually to then go into these groups, and you know, it could be 20 days out of date, because by the time you've actually got to the point of presenting, you know, you've been working on old data. You know, and I think those are kind of goes back to the point I made earlier about more proactive kind of measures and capabilities, so that you take that friction out of the process, so you can generate a report, a status report, you know, on an hourly basis if you wanted to, or a weekly or a monthly, whatever needed to be, so you can put it into those kind of groups. And again, the communication, it becomes fluid.
Yeah.
I think there's, before we, so I know there's some questions in the chat, but I think there's a big education piece around AI that sort of pulls together the points around it's not just an IT thing, it's not just the robots are coming to take our jobs. I think there's a big gap in educating people around it and not educating them in an assume, you know, you see lots of AI webinars, and I suspect the perception is, oh, well, if I'm not an engineer or if I'm not, you know, deep into my tech, I'm not going to be able to hang on to this. And I think there's a real opportunity in organisations that would support, obviously, specific conversations around how do you govern AI by just thinking about AI more globally and actually unpacking it beyond a chatbot or a, you know, something that's going to help you pull a spreadsheet together in 5 minutes rather than 5 hours. And I think that's where, if I think about how we're looking at it in the co-op, there are pockets of absolute brilliance and real progressive work going on in AI. But I think we've got an opportunity to really sort of make it more accessible to colleagues, and whether it's because it's something that we would encourage them to, you know, how do we adopt it into our roles? So we, you know, again, there's pockets of the business that are already adopting it, you know, if you think about you know, lawyers, case managers, etc. But more globally, how does Joe Bloggs adopt AI into their role or into their lives, and also do it in a way that is kind of more sort of open and inclusive around what AI is, rather than thinking it's a techie thing or it's going to nick my job? Because I think actually the magic is going to be how we as a society learn to sort of partner with AI, because it's not you know, it feeds off pre-existing knowledge that's been created by humans. So anyway, sounds a bit deep and philosophical, I don't want to go off on it, but I think there's a big bit around how that education piece, I think, unlocks things like this particular topic on governance, because if you frame it in that bigger world picture, people are like, right, yeah, I get it. Whereas at the minute, you sometimes run the risk of people still thinking, oh, that's for some techie guy or girl to worry about.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, totally agree on that. You know, it means so many different things to so many different people. You know, and again, it's not only about the solution that you're implementing, it's the output, you know, what that means, you know, whether it means it shaves an hour off, you know, a task, or whether it saves the company money. You know, again, it depends on, you know, the role in the organization that it means very different things to. And you're right, you know, education as to what AI actually is, it feeds into a lot more of the kind of the reason to do something, the return on investment, you know, around that. And, you know, the more people that are aware, the more buy-in you get. There obviously naturally then becomes more control around it, because there's so many people that, you know, they recognize that they're impacted. It actually makes their job easier, or, you know, more interesting, or whatever it might be. So they're going to be more kind of, I guess, aware as to what it means, and again, you know, the potential risks, the issues that are introduced, and again, the more people that are feeding into it, the more likely of it being successful.
Yeah,
makes sense. The first question that's been asked by Mike is an interesting one as well. So there's an education element to it, and there's the risk aversion piece, which we've just touched upon there. And it's I suppose if I read it verbatim, it's a regional law firm, and they're keen on automating, obviously the risk averse about data protection, which is understandable for everybody. It's one of the key reasons why you have these kind of conversations. It's like, do you think currently we're in a special window where a company can really get ahead compared to 2 to 3 years from now when the rest of society catches on? And if so, how do you explain this to the bosses? So I suppose it's coming at from a different angle, somebody working in the IT function and heading up that. How do you articulate this to the rest of the firm who don't understand it? Because again, there is an educational piece required to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It it comes down to that point I kind of made it a little bit earlier around, you know, AI everywhere. It's the opposite to that. It's about understanding where the real return is, and it might only be like 2% of the processes, you know, will benefit from AI, but you'll get a huge amount of return. And it's going through an exercise of identifying where the biggest bang for the buck is, and starting there. Start small, and then you allow it to foster and you know, gain weight and kind of spread its wings into other areas, and that's where you will get the biggest traction from implementing AI, because you again, comes back to the words that I was saying before about control. You know, you can see it, feel it, touch it, you can work it through, you can get it right. Eat the elephant one bite at a time is probably a way of describing it. And once you get one area working and singing, you've then got your data to prove it. Then from a boss perspective, you've got that kind of business case already in flight, and that's the key part of it. And again, comes back to conversations that we've had where that's where the nervousness comes in. You know, it's a lot of C-suite execs are keen to get AI in, but they don't know what the right approach is, where the right place to put it is. And again, they feel like that's the decision. Whereas I think, again, you know, using some of the terms I've mentioned before around panels and committees and things like that. And again, it make it more, and again, to Liz's point, it make it more inclusive, and you'll get to the right decision off the back of that. But yeah, I mean, like I say, I wasn't prepared for that question, but so hopefully that helped. I mean, anyone else got any thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I think you covered. Sorry,
yeah.
Claire.
No, I was going to say, I think you pretty much covered that one.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to that. If you get it working really well in one place, it's the kid in the sweet shop. If one person sees it, and lawyers are renowned for it, I mean, you look at the boom of stand-up desks. I mean, you only ever had like people with back problems getting them, and now it's like everybody's got everybody's got a stand-up desk. So Absolutely. It's a kid in a sweet shop. If one person runs with it and is successful, everybody else will want it. But then the risk of that is people just go, well, yeah, we've got to have AI. Yeah, because everybody else is doing it, but then they don't understand it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Another question, which is tailored around the compliance, the data protection, and the security elements. And essentially it's saying, has anything really changed? Obviously, it's always an important thing, but I think the underlying piece to that is AI definitely has a significant impact in terms of what happens downstream if things go wrong. The statistic on the slide is testament to that. So yeah, just throwing that out to the panel. Is it because the stakes have now got higher that people are looking at it more when it comes to the governance and compliance side?
I think you're going back to the data point of view. And again, pardon my expression, but you put shit in, you get shit out. If your data's not good, if the integrity of your data is not good, if your quality of your data is not good, then that drives the success of your AI solution ultimately. So has anything changed from a data point of view? Absolutely. There's more emphasis on getting that right than ever before. If it was just a report that you were running, you could recognize something's off and it's not really have a huge amount of impact. But if your AI is running off that data, then that impact could be, compounded every hour, every minute that it's being used. And again, hallucinations start coming into the process and all that sort of good stuff. So from a governance point of view, again, that's where it's not just about the AI process. It's understanding what your data assets are and where the dependencies are between those and where the risks are introduced. And it is a lot deeper than just, looking at an AI process. It's looking at everything that feeds into that. And again, shameless plug, that's what we've focused on with Govscape. It's not just about the AI process, it's looking at everything.
Makes
sense. I don't know whether I answered that or not, but any
covered it well, I'd say. So next question, where are confidentiality, privilege, and data boundaries most exposed? I think it'd be a good one to start with you on that, Stephen, obviously with your background and what you've seen in, like I said, 23 years of time served.
Yeah, and again, confidentiality, integrity, the availability, everything like that, it's key. But bringing AI into it, just, in my experience, exposes it more type thing. So those risks and controls that you've got in place already, if you chuck AI into that, you're actually going to expose them quicker type thing. So from my point of view, that's where I see it type thing. So.
Yeah, and again, I think this is where a lot of firms, really need to start paying attention. And again, it's not just because it's you're implementing AI. It's again the output to that, the consequence of that output, I should say. It's your client and your business risk. You're exposing a hell of a lot more around that. It isn't AI making the mistakes that's the problem. It's the where the risk enters the workflow, and then that then drives decisions being made further down the line. It kind of what I mentioned there about the data, interdepartmental kind of dependencies, committees, boards. They're basically they're relying on the AI because that's what they've been told to do. And again, link that back to what Lizzie's point was around education. It's getting a mix of everything in play. And I think, from a Govscape point of view, I think that might be something that we should plug into it as a new feature, looking at around education, around AI, and put something in around that to make sure that there are education points. It doesn't currently cover it, but I think that's a point that I will take away from this.
Yeah, well, I think people have extreme views with using AI as well, and people can be overly cautious, and some are kind of just pedal to the metal with it, which is why you're getting all these examples in the real world of the implications downstream in terms of people being reported to the SRA and high profile cases, because people aren't educated, and some that aren't educated are then very averse to actually using the tools, and then there are others that go the opposite way. When I attend certain networking events and I might speak to lawyers, I can kind of read between the lines that if the business itself isn't mature in terms of letting the lawyers use the tools and educating them on the tools. They will be using them outside of any governance. They don't explicitly say that, but there's enough evidence to support it out there, and those conversations I've had definitely definitely kind of send that signal. I don't know if you've got similar situations, but I suppose you're not going to say, oh, we've had situations where certain lawyers have used tools and stuff like that. Obviously not, but I suppose it's something that could be a concern, because again, there's enough signals in the market that say people are doing these things whether you like it or not, therefore you're best to empower them and govern them effectively.
Yeah, exactly.
It'd be interesting to see. No, I was just thinking I might be barking at the wrong tree here, but it'd be interesting to see how the GDPR sort of guidance, legislation, rules, whatever, kind of need to evolve. I mean, I know AI doesn't change the fact that you've got to manage personal information correctly and, you know, allow people to access it, all of that good stuff. But it'd be interesting to see how, you know, those particular quarters are thinking about this as well, because you boil it down to your basics. It's just, again, another route to where data may be exposed or managed or manipulated in a certain way, and what are the controls around it. Because you might find yourself with, you know, if you think about people working in HR, they might be using AI tooling to analyze payroll data, or I don't know, grievance themes and what have you. So it'd be interesting to see what the guardrails are around, you know, dumping that into whatever tool they choose, and whether that is, you know, breaching GDPR or not. So again, a sort of a thinking out loud point, but it is something that I would imagine needs to be stitched together or considered as part of, obviously, the governance piece more generally.
100%. And, you know, again, you know, that's kind of one of our kind of approaches, is we start at framework level, you know, so whether it's ISO 42001, 27001, GDPR, we capture those frameworks that are in play. And then we bring the policies into the process. And then, you know, using the platform, it then identifies the gaps between what the framework says and the actual company policy. So that's then generating exactly where your focus needs to be, and then you go through the process of applying controls, risks, issues, etc. And again, I think it's that kind of almost like a methodology that's required, something repeatable, recognizable, and, you know, people can actually adopt as part of the process. You know, ultimately, I guess the sticking point or downfall to all of this is that, you know, we're only as good as the frameworks, you know, state, you know, so maybe there needs to be a certain amount of common sense. I think that's kind of what you were alluding to, Liz, where you know, where you apply a different kind of viewpoint to, you know, to an AI workflow that might be actually potentially exposing some personal data. So again, you need to identify that, flag that, and again, the human in the loop is just as important as anything, you know, in all of this. You know, we use some automations in Govscape to actually highlight and pick out these, you know, glaringly obvious gaps. But again, the principle behind that is that's more removing friction to get in, you know, the current state view. The real value comes when the human in the loop is actually going, actually, I recognise this as a potential problem, putting it in a solution, and then that traceability from all the way from framework right the way down to a risk or an issue, and how those are managed, you know, is what we bring as part of a solution. Nice.
Very conscious of time, and we've got one more question. It's really useful stuff, and it's always a good sign that people are engaging with it. It means you're kind of touching on some topics that people can relate to and actually want to have a conversation about. Last question: could you evidence what actually happened if a client, regulator, or court asked? So this is after the fact now. So we're talking about how we prevent these things, but actually, when something goes wrong, and I emphasize the word when. How do you evidence that? And I think that's also a key challenge, because AI will create problems and humans using AI will create problems. And how do you then evidence that and make sure you satisfy governing bodies, regulators, think it's a key piece that people want to solve, and it also gives people, well, they're very challenged when it comes to adopting because they understand the downstream risk, and if this does occur for their firm, the impact is massive, and obviously the exposure there is massive. So they want to try and avoid that at all costs, but also be able to account for when things do go wrong, which is obviously a healthy practice. Not sure who to throw that out to first of all.
I'll go. I say, I mean, governance isn't like it's not a verbal thing. You know, it's about action. It's what you can prove and how you can evidence base it. You know, so it's about having every aspect of the process, you know, between your policies, controls, risks, frameworks, gaps, etc. That's the biggest part of this. And you know, again, I'm pretty sure Steve will confirm this. But you know, you look at the way governance is handled historically, you know, and IDS as an example of this, you know, historically as it is today, we put IDS through Govscape, so we're eating our own dog food. But historically, we had all of our policies just sitting on a SharePoint drive, and we visited it probably once every 6 months. We do, you know, biannual audit and then the actual annual audit with ISO, and things were flagged. You know, gaps were identified. We go ahead and fix them. But it's not enough. You know, from an IDS point of view, we're moving quicker because we're actually embracing, you know, AI in terms of what we do and how we're doing it, and obviously we're basically building a platform to support organisations adopting it. You know, so it's about having that kind of, again, full traceability, having the ability then to actually even partially automate the ability to elevate the level of governance, you know, to a very different place by having those reminders of prompts that, you know, a governance officer comes in on a Monday morning and they get the note to say in their inbox, say, right, these are today's or this week's kind of focus. This is everything that you need to do. Every mouse click that's performed in terms of approving something, fixing something, it's captured, it's fully audited, you know, so we can generate reports, which is one thing, but ultimately everything is a mouse click is actually recorded in an audit log. So again, it's capturing what has actually gone forward, you know. So we look at it from that point of view where, you know, imagine if your client asked you, you know, how was AI used on my matter? You know, again, would you be able to answer that, you know, honestly? And I'm guessing not.
I think that goes back to what Liz was saying as well. Does GDPR going to have to evolve? Because that's a question a client could quite actually ask and has a right to ask.
Exactly.
And I don't think, from my perspective, many firms could answer that right now, type thing. You know? But it's about having that sort of logging and audit trails and everything like that in place from the beginning, not thinking, oh, right, we've got AI, but can we actually evidence that? Where's the logs to prove that AI changed this type thing? Right? You know, too late if it's already in because it's increased that risk type thing. Right?
I think a lot of the challenges are, one of the question Mike's asked in the chat is, does anybody understand AI really, or LLMs? And I use it a lot. I've used it loads over the last year or so, intensively, and I don't understand it. So I think I'm sure if anybody stepped up and said they do understand it, I'd be pretty surprised, because there's just so much nuance to it and it evolves so quickly. And I think that is the scary bit, but it's also why these things are so important, what we've spoken about today, because that lack of understanding means we need the guardrails around it even more so.
Yeah.
And the blast radius is massive as well. I don't know if anybody disagrees with that, but that seems to be like what I see.
Well, it is. It's huge, and like I say, even if you're using AI in the smallest of senses, as per, you know, I've kind of mentioned before, you know, if you just focus on 1% of the process and implemented it, you know, the blast radius could be huge if it was wrong. You know, for example, it could be in a I don't know, invoice reconciliation process. And I use that as an example because we're involved in a project that's delivering that at the moment. And from a business point of view, you get that wrong, your numbers are down. And potentially that could be catastrophic. If you're thinking that you're trading on, I don't know, 100 million a month or whatever it might be, but then in reality, because your reconciliation's off, it's actually only 60 million. There's a huge delta there that needs to be made up, and in some instances that can send companies under. And again, I'm being quite dramatic, I know, but it's about making sure that the focus is on the governance of those kind of AIs. And making sure that instead of just focusing purely on a policy, as I mentioned, historically that's what a lot of organisations do. It's making sure that you've got the evidence that demonstrates the control over the policy adherence, then that the AI is actually performing, the people are using it in the right way, and again, I'm not saying you're fully protected, but you are, because you've got those controls. You've got the less likelihood that you're going to run into any kind of cul-de-sac of some description.
Makes sense.
I mean, ultimately, the evidence question is one that I don't think many firms are actually, ready for. Sorry, Luke.
No, it's a good point, and again, it's something that does need to be addressed, and there's going to be more and more instances of this. I do think regulations are going to evolve as well. A lot of market research I do, there's always cases of SRA giving guidance on things constantly. It could be like, as I see many updates, I think you was about to say something there, Stephen, as well. Have you seen those kind of things going on in the market as well?
No, I think you're right, and I think they have to evolve with it, type thing, like, and at the moment there's maybe a sense of they're all trying to catch up, type thing at the moment, like, and these things will have to evolve, type thing. I agree.
Perfect. Well, we've run over the 45 minutes, so I don't know if anybody's got any additional questions they'd like to ask. Also good to know if it was useful. I think it's been a great conversational piece, which is a much better format than talking with a PowerPoint there and everybody looking at a PowerPoint for 45 minutes, actually having a discussion so we can compare ideas and expand on them. I think that's a much more powerful way of engaging, and I enjoy it more. I think everybody enjoys it more. Nobody wants to sit and watch a PowerPoint, and I certainly don't want to hear my dulcet tone for 45 minutes and everybody just have to listen to that as well. So I think that's been really good. So if there's any other questions, throw them out. But other than that, like I say, I've really enjoyed it.
Yep. No questions from me, so I've really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed being involved. Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
Perfect.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Helpful discussion.
Lovely. Well, thanks for joining.
Cheers.
Take
Thanks.
care.
Bye-bye.
Cheers,
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.